Rob Liefeld may be the artist most closely associated with Deadpool, which is fair, because he did, after all, design the character and illustrate him first. But which artist or writer truly shaped Deadpool into the character that we as readers recognize today? Could it have been Fabian Nicieza or artist Ed McGuinness? Well, I'm going to argue that it was writer Joe Kelly that did the most, but let's take a look at the first decade of Deadpool's history and the creators that worked on him, and maybe you'll have a different opinion. Let's do it. Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. At the very end of 1990, Deadpool debuted in the pages of New Mutants issue 98. But he wasn't really recognizable as the character that we know today. And that's actually fairly common with most, if not all, serialized superheroes that take place in a shared universe at places like Marvel and DC. It takes a while sometimes to figure out the recipe to bake that character into what we recognize. For instance, Superman didn't originally fly in the comics. That came years later from the animation. Miles Morales started off as a character very similar to Peter Parker, a nerdy high school kid. But his first animated movie gave him interests in music and street art, which has stuck. And Deadpool, while sarcastic, didn't have his personality, his powers, his supporting cast, or his origin explained until much later. It was a while till we finally got the Merc with a mouth. But before I go too far, I would like to thank this episode's sponsor. It is Portland's premier pop culture event. It's right in my own backyard, Rose City Comic-Con. For over a decade, Rose City Comic-Con has brought together artists and readers of comics with that unique Portland vibe. This awesome Pacific Northwest event helps close out the summer convention season with a 3-day event going from September 6th through the 8th. Some of the unique things to look forward to this year include a drink and draw event with some of the guests I've had on my show, like Christopher Priest and Zach Davison, portfolio reviews with publishers like DC and Dark Horse, and the always popular cosplay competition on Saturday night. The guest list is also loaded with huge names in comics like Chip Zdarsky, Mirka Andolfo, and the just-announced Mike Mignola. And here's the best part. If you go, you might meet me. No, I'm kidding. That's not the best part. While it's true that I will be there, the best part is that you, my viewers, can use my code, TROPES, and that promo code will get you $5 off of your badge. Not bad, right? But I do encourage you to act quickly because standard pricing does end August 30th. Thanks again to Rose City Comic-Con for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to talking about Deadpool. Deadpool's first story appearance was in New Mutants 98, which hit shelves in December of 1990. It was plotted and illustrated by Rob Liefeld and scripted by Fabian Nicieza. Nicieza spoke about Deadpool's origins to Marvel at the New York Comic-Con back in 2014, saying,
Deadpool was a character that Rob introduced in New Mutants 98. It was the first issue he was going to take over plotting and penciling the book. I was going to be the scripter, so I was working off of his plots. And he had in mind to generate some real excitement right off the bat by introducing 3 new characters in one issue.
I remember the cover stuff.
Those characters were going to be the person he intended to be the breakout big villain of the Marvel Universe, which was Gideon. Of
course.
A character named,
just look at me right now. We love that
character named Domino. Character named Domino, who was going to be a mysterious mercenary who had a lot of ties to Cable, so we'd be able to flesh Cable out a little more through her. And the third one was going to be this throwaway mercenary guy that Cable was going to fight, and maybe he'd heard of him before. Yeah. Knowing Rob the way I did then, we talked the character through. I got to understand what some of his influences were in creating and generating the visual look of the character, and decided when I was doing the script that the book needed a counterpoint to Cable's formality and stiffness and rough nature. Yeah. So I made Deadpool a wise ass.
Yeah. Gideon was planned to be the big new villain and showed up a lot in New Mutants and X-Force in those first few years, but Liefeld only drew Deadpool in New Mutants number 98 and its successor comic X-Force for issues 2, 4, and 5. In those 4 issues, Deadpool attacks Cable on behalf of the mysterious Mr. Tolliver, and later grabs Juggernaut and Black Tom Cassidy for his same employer. In the final issue Liefeld plotted, Tolliver sends Deadpool to check in on X-Force's new member, Domino, and we see that she's actually someone named Vanessa who is working undercover for Tolliver and hasn't checked in lately. Deadpool beats her up to deliver a message and implies that they used to be a couple. Liefeld illustrated just 4 appearances, and one of them is just a single panel in an issue, before he left to help form Image Comics. Nicieza took over as writer and had some guest artists like Mark Pacella, where they had Deadpool still working for Tolliver. Many years later, Tolliver was revealed to be Cable's son from the future, Tyler Dayspring, having traveled to the past for revenge. But that's Cable's story. Deadpool had his costume from the beginning, and it's only had minor modifications depending on the artists over the years. Even Liefeld doesn't draw him completely consistently in his first appearances. Sometimes his swords will disappear and reappear within the same page, for instance. Deadpool is shown to be a mercenary. He's a little bit of a wise-ass, although not overly so, and he carries his signature weapons, guns and swords. While these are important foundational elements, his powers were not introduced at all. We never saw Liefeld draw Deadpool's face, and Deadpool's sense of humor wasn't fully developed. We can tell that things like his healing powers haven't been considered yet, as in an early appearance he talks about having to have had his jaw wired shut for weeks. The Deadpool of today can heal very quickly from much worse. So, that begs the question. What elements make Deadpool recognizable as Deadpool? That's an important question for any character. Their look is important. What they do is important. But more important is what motivates a character. That's usually explained in an origin. What makes the character unique or special? Liefeld probably did not intend Deadpool to be the breakout success he was. He was just intended to be a mysterious villain. Nicieza said that he was designed to be a throwaway villain until editor Bob Harris noted that the reader response was strong and suggested bringing him back in X-Force. In my opinion, the design seems heavily inspired by Deathstroke, and if we look at Liefeld's art at the time, he was clearly influenced by the Teen Titans comics of that era that had introduced Deathstroke, also a mercenary who carried both guns and a sword. That said, Liefeld himself said that the character was inspired by characters like Wolverine with a mysterious background, Spider-Man with his expressive mask and wise-ass personality, and Snake Eyes as a deadly ninja. To figure out what's most important to making Deadpool Deadpool, I polled readers across my various social media accounts. I got over 10,000 votes and comments, and the results surprised me a little bit. Over 70% said that the most important thing to Deadpool is his specific sense of humor, with comments then going into detail about breaking the fourth wall and being laugh-out-loud funny. A column for something else averaged about 15% of votes, with the most frequent comments there explaining that it was his skill set and his history, specifically his history of battling depression and using humor to mask that as a sad clown archetype. His look was a distant second, averaging just over 10%, with his powers averaging only about 5% of the votes. So Liefeld definitely gets credit for Deadpool's look, no question there. And Liefeld and Nicieza definitely should get some credit for giving the character a sarcastic personality, although I will argue future writers built on that to shape a more unique sense of humor. We'll get there. For now, let's jump back to Deadpool's first year with his appearances in X-Force. Greg Capullo joined the book as the ongoing artist, and by issue 15, Deadpool occasionally popped up in subplots, still attacking Cable for Mr. Tolliver, or going after Vanessa, who was masquerading as Domino. By issue 21, Tolliver was supposedly dead, and Vanessa had bailed on posing as Domino and changed her look to that of her best friend in Boston. Deadpool tracked her down over a few issues for personal reasons. In the movies, Vanessa is Deadpool's very serious girlfriend, but obviously their relationship is really only hinted at in the comics. Also, she is shown to have shape-shifting abilities, which she does not have in the movies. Deadpool and another mercenary get the drop on Vanessa, but are shot in the back by Domino. However, Vanessa says Deadpool isn't dead and that it takes a lot more to kill him. This is the first hint at his healing powers. These issues span 1991 through 1993, but Deadpool's dialogue is mostly sarcastic threats, like when he fights Kane and tells him that he just doesn't cut it. Get it? Cut it? I kill me. But first, I kill you. He's jokey during a fight, but it's still not that different than a bad guy like, say, Dr. Octopus breaking into an airplane cockpit and telling everyone they've met their new co-pilot. Deadpool had been popping up in subplots, but fans liked the character, and without a boss, it was time to give the character his own storyline. That came in the form of a 4-issue limited series by Fabian Nicieza, with an up-and-coming artist named Joe Madureira, whose work on the book helped him land the penciling duties on X-Men. The plot is simple. Everyone in the know is looking for the dead Tolliver's secret treasure. The comic introduces Waid's mercenary friend Weasel, a slimier and less capable mercenary, but one good at tech, and it gives someone for Deadpool to talk to. Also, honestly, he becomes Deadpool's punching bag. The jokes are still pretty tame, like Deadpool fighting Kane and saying, "Now you're singing a cool tune, here's the topic. Bionic punks who deserve to be beat up, next on Sally." That's a reference to the then-current daytime talk show Sally Jessy Raphael. It's aged like a fine wine, clearly. By virtue of the fact that he's the star, Deadpool definitely talks a lot more though, and that establishes his personality of never being able to be quiet. He's constantly talking. Issue 1 is the first time he's called Wade Wilson. That's an example of Nicieza commenting on the similarity to Deathstroke by giving Deadpool the name Wade Wilson as a satirization of Slade Wilson. Issue 3 adds the most to Deadpool to this point. Some bad guys are scanning his brain and we see brief flashbacks. We see that Deadpool broke up with Vanessa while being a mercenary, and then later we see that he's dying of cancer and he didn't want her to see him like that. In the present, Deadpool's mask is removed for the first time, and while we only see him from behind, we see his head is scarred. And Deadpool says they've learned how he beat cancer. Deadpool explains in issue 4 that his body is constantly healing, leaving him looking hideous. In the final issue, an enemy named Slayback tries to kill Deadpool, but Vanessa jumps in the way to save him. Later, Vanessa tells Deadpool that there's still good in him if he can get beyond who he is now. The series ends with Deadpool telling Weasel that maybe there is more to him. It sets him on a path to be something deeper. Honestly, rereading these comics reminded me that Fabian Nicieza had added more to the character than I'd remembered. The healing powers, the friendship with Weasel, and setting him on a path to be better than he was. 1994 was a really good year for Deadpool. He got a second really good miniseries that year. The character's follow-up 4-issue miniseries came out a few months later, this time by writer Mark Waid and artist Ian Churchill. Issue 1's credits is the first time that Deadpool is referred to as the Merc with a Mouth. Issue 1 also has Waid drinking away his misery and calling himself the Merc with the Mope. The sad clown element seems to start there. He covers his extreme depression with jokes. Deadpool tells the bartender he's functionally immortal, and when some other mercenaries attack him, he jests about how hard it is to find a bar that serves a guy who wears a mask, and that he can't even get served at Taco Bell. The series shows that even though he heals, it definitely hurts, and establishes that Deadpool has a crush on superhero Siren. I honestly think the jokes are a little better at this point. After a thug yells to fire at Deadpool, he replies that it's a crime to yell fire in a crowded fight scene. Humor either works for you or it doesn't, but this is a step up in my opinion. The miniseries also introduces Dr. Kilbrew, the scientist who gave Deadpool his cursed healing powers. Waid is shown to want a cure, but it's all interrupted with a battle with villain Black Tom Cassidy. Deadpool does have an important and tragic scene in a fight where he desperately tries to get back his mask so that Siren doesn't see him. But when she does, she actually reacts with kindness. A lot of readers said that Deadpool's tragic past and his use of humor specifically to cover up his overwhelming pain and depression is really important to them. We get that, and I think that the humor honestly goes up a notch here. I think it's really funny, and it becomes a defining element. Those are the highlights in an otherwise somewhat superfluous miniseries. But I do think it's funny, and that's interesting to me because Mark Waid told Wizard magazine in an interview that if he knew that Deadpool was as bad as he had been, for instance beating up Vanessa and never getting any punishment for it, he wouldn't have taken on the writing duties there. I think he wrote a good miniseries, but he said that he wouldn't have taken it if he really knew Deadpool's past at that point. Anyway, after this, Deadpool went pretty quiet for a while. The first two miniseries came out in 1994. From 1994 through 1995, Deadpool popped up in just 7 comics, from X-Force to Wolverine to Silver Sable. He didn't appear at all in 1996, but finally got a new ongoing series in 1997 by writer Joe Kelly and artist Ed McGuinness. McGuinness clearly has a distinct and dynamic style and beefed up Deadpool. Also, while it may seem small, McGuinness changed how the mask was drawn, giving it a little pointy bit. That may not seem important in and of itself, but it does differentiate Deadpool from, say, Spider-Man's mask, and it was a detail included in the live-action movies. Writer Joe Kelly had earned his Master's of Fine Arts at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, and was recruited into Marvel's writer's workshop called the Stan Hatton Project in 1995. He did a few one-shot issues, and Deadpool was his first big opportunity. Today, Kelly is well known for being one of the members of the comics group Men of Action Studios and is a co-creator of the popular cartoon Ben 10, but he made his name on Deadpool. Kelly wrote the title for 3 years, adding to the humor and supporting cast. Deadpool gets mercenary jobs at Hell House, where Weasel often hangs out. And Deadpool gets a roommate, Blind Al, an elderly retiree. Their relationship is absolutely a highlight of this comic. It's a fascinatingly complex relationship. Some of the key elements Kelly added included enemies like T-Ray, flashbacks to explain more of Wade's tragic past with Vanessa, and new enemies like Ajax, who he likes to call Francis. This is also where we have to note that Deadpool starts breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to readers. That happens first in issue 28, with art by Pete Woods. In Marvel Comics, She-Hulk by John Byrne was doing that back in 1989, but it's becoming an ongoing element with Deadpool, and one readers seem to feel defines him. It makes sense. Deadpool might be a little crazy, and this is a way to demonstrate that while also inserting more quips and humorous asides. For my money, the best issue in this run is number 11, in which Deadpool and Blind Al go back in time. Specifically, they end up in Queens, New York, during the events of Amazing Spider-Man issue 47. Very meta. Blind Al and Deadpool accidentally knock out Aunt May and later set up ridiculous traps to keep making her faint. They decide to impersonate both Aunt May and Peter Parker, thanks to Wade's holographic projector, until they can find a way home. This issue is laugh-out-loud funny, with Deadpool as Peter Parker utterly baffled by the way characters like Harry Osborn talk, riffing on the unique way Stan Lee wrote dialogue. Little asides like Harry saying, "He'll get the door, maybe it'll be Sophia Loren," or "Would you guess, Captain Kangaroo?" Those are note perfect. I laughed out loud when Harry talks to his father, Norman, and Deadpool is stunned that they both have the same weird hair. Pete Woods manages to do a great imitation of John Romita Sr.'s art style with the occasional direct homages such as Deadpool battling Kraven. Joe Kelly's 3-year run is legit great. It's often laugh out loud funny, but that humor is used for a specific purpose. It's used to help show Deadpool's personality, that he's in constant pain and that he uses that to cover for that pain. It also means that on those rare occasions where he drops the sarcasm, it's such a tonal shift, it really helps emphasize how intensely Deadpool does care for those around him. The book developed an actual theme. Deadpool is a character in search of redemption. He feels guilty for the things he's done in the past. And it also establishes that he's a flawed character that keeps making mistakes. You know, he'll take 2 steps forward, but he will take 1 back. So it's never going to be a quick path to redemption. At the end of 10 years, that meant that Deadpool was finally in a form that he's recognizable today. But just because Joe Kelly's run ended doesn't mean that Deadpool didn't continue to have excellent stories. Some later runs that help show a unique angle on Deadpool that I'd recommend include Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force run, where Deadpool ends up being the unlikely heart of the team. I'd also recommend the more recent issues of Deadpool by writers Jerry Duggan and Brian Posehn. Those are absurd and hilarious, but also it shows Deadpool greatly admires someone who seems his polar opposite, and that's Captain America. That run starts off with some fantastic Tony Moore artwork too. While I will argue Joe Kelly added the most to Deadpool, or at least refined him, Deadpool is that unique thing that can really only happen with serialized superheroes owned by Marvel or DC. A series of artists and writers that each add something important to the story. Ultimately, it's kind of funny that Deadpool ended up becoming as popular as he did, because he was basically created in the same breath as throwaway villains like Thumbelina and Forearm. But there was something there. There was something special that readers were responding to, and Deadpool came back and really got lucky by getting a series of writers and artists who were each newer to the industry and were hungry to prove themselves. They gave Deadpool their everything, and the character benefited from it. Deadpool as a person may be tragic, but Deadpool as a character is actually very lucky that he ended up with a series of tremendous talent that gave him a destiny for something bigger. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you again to Rose City Comic-Con. Again, the details for that are in the description below on how you can get a discount. I will be back very soon, and I have a few more comments that I'll give you over the credits. But until next time, keep reading comics. This was so fun to talk about. I just read Deadpool voraciously when he came out. I was a big New Mutants fan. Of course, I was reading X-Force. I remember thinking that Joe Madureira had a very unique, cool art style in that first miniseries. But I also sort of in my head had got it that Joe Kelly had done even more than he did. While I think Joe Kelly did the most to refine Deadpool and build some important elements like the fourth wall breaking and really specifically get his sense of humor right, a lot of those foundational elements did come from a lot of other creators. I think that one of the reasons we associate Liefeld so much with the character is not just that he co-created him, because he really only drew him a few times before he pieced out to make Image. I think it's that Liefeld has come back, you know, to work on the character for more miniseries with Marvel. And I think that that was smart, you know? It's good that he's so well associated. But in all the interviews that I came across, it seems like Nicieza and Liefeld had a good working relationship. They seem to have a lot of respect for each other, which is really nice to see. I want to give a shout out to my fellow comic book YouTuber, Godzilla Mendoza. He is also doing a Deadpool episode this weekend, specifically on Deadpool cosplay. So I think that that should be a lot of fun. I encourage you to check that out. And once more, thank you to Rose City Comic-Con. If you're anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, I hope to see you there. Take care, guys. I'll see you real soon.